right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special Monday edition of Masterclass with the Mom Project. We are so excited that you're here to join us today. Before we kick off today's session, we wanted to first say thank you to everyone for joining us and welcome back for those who've joined us for a masterclass in the past. And for those of you who are new to the Mom Project, we are a digital talent marketplace and community where moms, dads, and caregivers can realize their full potential. Through our marketplace, we connect you with job opportunities at family-friendly companies that allow you to thrive at work and at home. And through our community, we provide you with the support, tools, and connections you need to keep moving forward in your journey as a working mother. We are beyond excited to welcome back our friends Susan and Kelley from Prepare to Launch You for today's session. Susan and Kelley are our resident experts for all things pertaining to re-entering the workforce, and will be leading a dynamic session today around making the most of your opt-out years. So whether you are contemplating opting out, maybe you're currently living your opt-out years right now, or maybe are hoping to re-enter the workforce at the end of your opt-out years soon here, this session will have something for everyone. We received questions that you all submitted as part of your RSVPs, and we will weave those throughout the session today. But as always, feel free to drop in additional questions, comments, thoughts, feelings into the chat. My colleague Jennifer is there and manning the chat live, and we'll surface as many questions as they come up in real time. Additionally, we will follow up this session with an email that will include a recording of the session, as well as some important follow-ups from Susan and Kelley. So without further ado, I would love to pass the torch on to Susan and Kelley.
Thank you guys so much. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome back for those of you who've met us before.
Yes.
And
we're always happy to be here and speak to this community and speak to so many of the women out there that are walking the journey and the path that we are very passionate about.
And that we both walked ourselves.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
So today's topic is making the most of your opt-out years. And we're looking at it through two lenses. One, as someone who is currently during taking that career break and is thinking ahead, maybe in the future, to going back to work, but wants to know what they can do now to better position themselves for success. And then also for those who are like, I want to get back to work now. Yeah. How do I account for this time when I haven't been working in the traditional sense?
Right. Right.
So, and I think we're going to do, it's maybe 15, 20 minutes of slide presentation. We'll weave your questions in. So maybe take us to 30, and then we're going to try to allow, at least 30, at least 20, let's be honest.
Yeah.
We're talkers at the end for your questions. So thank you for sticking with us.
So for those of you,
I know.
So for those of you who have not met us before, we are both moms of 4. I have 4 boys. I actually have a house filled with 3 teenagers and a 1-year-old toddler. There was a little surprise Harry that joined our crew in the last year. So
other than you, he's my favorite staff person. He's also the only other one. I'm also a mom of 4, and I have 4, 2 still in college and 2 out, 3 boys and a girl. We've both taken career breaks.
Yeah.
Mine from big tech corporate world, Kelley's from education, and we both made our way back in.
Yes, we did. And we were starting a company at over 40 and over 50. So if you are someone who falls into that category, know you can do it. And you can also at over 40 have a baby and come back again and do it again.
Do a maternity leave.
Yes, exactly.
We have a combined 30 years of experience working in just the specifics. So there are a lot of people who navigate career counseling and whatnot, but this is our niche. This is like what we live and breathe.
Yes. And today we're going to help all of you. So let's dive right in and tell you what's going to happen in this masterclass.
So first, we're going to define the 6 key areas of career break engagement. So these are the areas where typically a person on a career break will engage in caregiving, in volunteering, and maybe in work. And then we're going to introduce 5 strategic ways to engage with an eye on the future. That's kind of the first half. I'm in this break. I'm probably going to be in it for another 6 months or a year, maybe longer. What can I do now to make myself in a better position later?
Yeah. We're going to share tips on how to present your career break experience for a relaunch now in ways to satisfy job requirements and excite those potential employers. Yeah.
And a lot of it is also kind of getting yourself, we're almost just giving you permission to look at those things that you've done during your break in a different way and to value them perhaps more than you normally do.
That's actually what we want you to do. We want you to start to think a little differently about how you're looking at those opt-out years, because you may be telling yourself some things that are not true.
Yeah.
And then we're going to present 4 career relaunch success stories to inspire you. We have the privilege of working with, thousands of women.
Yeah.
I mean, we've worked with so many women who have done this, and we're going to share a few inspiring
Yeah,
stories.
sometimes it's better than us telling you.
Exactly.
Right? And we're going to answer your general questions. And as we mentioned, Jennifer and Katie provided some of those, so we'll kind of weave those in. So what's a career break? It's extended time off from the paid workforce. If you've been out for 6 months, that's not a career break.
Right.
We're looking at 30 to 30 years, and we've had most of our students were probably
3 to 30 years.
Yeah, what did I say? 30 to
30.
30? There we go. Come on, this tea better kick in soon. We've had students graduate and successfully go on to careers after, I think the most we've had is a 26-year break.
Yeah.
So we're looking at, most of our students are longer term.
Yeah. It's common among women with caregiving responsibilities. You are not alone.
And especially now.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the next one.
Right. Yeah. Right. 43%. I would actually like to revisit the statistic now, because this is pre-COVID, but before COVID, 43% of women would be taking a career break at some point to care for family. And that we mean anything 3 years and up. And of course that number is swelling. We don't have new stats, but the more telling statistic is that 90% of them do return to work.
Right.
So this should be no surprise in the workforce that women leave and come back. Still, we've got some employers that kind of haven't, read the memo yet.
Yeah. And what we really want you to get is that your break years are an asset. They're not a liability. And we need to start thinking in that way, and we need to start speaking in that way. And that's what we're going to show you how to do.
Exactly.
Okay.
So there are some favorable trends right now for returning after a career break. One is the new complexion of the workforce. So first of all, we're all living longer. And the paradigm of you work to 62 and a half and retire it's just so dated, because most people are living until late 80s, right? I think the average age for a woman is 86. So that's a long time. Yeah. So when those laws were written, you stopped working at 62 and a half and you died at 68.
62, so, I'll have a senior graduating from high school.
Right.
I will not be retired. I can promise you all that.
I'll be a lot older. You just got to hope that I hang on. But anyway, so we've just got that. There's also the expectation of a multi-generational workforce right now, with 5 generations working at the same time, that will continue in perpetuity. So people are starting to learn that these older workers have a place and they're going to stay. Right. So just the fact that the career path that might have been from 22 to 62 now could go to 82. If you take a 15-year career gap, that's nothing in a career that spans 60 years, right? And of course, the exponential growth of women-owned businesses. So we do have, we've never really measured, I'm guessing it's maybe 20 to 25% of the women who work with us that move on to start their own businesses. The average age, by the way, is over 50.
Right.
Which we love.
That Me Too movement, the mandate that came, all the mandates that came along with that, that's definitely acting in our favor. COVID-19 creating the flexible workspace, although there have been many issues and, worries that have happened because of COVID-19. There have been some silver linings.
That's been a big silver lining. My last company was a flexible work company. We did advocacy, teaching companies how to set up flexible work policies and why, so they wouldn't lose all the moms who had babies.
So if you had ever worked in a flexible work plan, she was on the forefront of writing probably that policy.
Yeah. But there were always the ones that were like, well, if I can't see someone sitting at a desk working, they can't possibly be working. Well, those hands have been forced, and these people are now seeing the flexibility works.
Well, just my husband. I mean, our office mate that is over here, he's
actually left because we're so
loud. He never
loud.
would have done the flexible work thing. He actually doesn't want to go back.
I know Bob doesn't either. I mean, I think it's been a wonderful thing for people to realize that you can work well and have better balance.
I think this next one's really important, Suze.
So this is a big one. Obviously, everybody knows it's DE&I in most companies, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I always feel like the last frontier of DE&I is the older worker, the person who's 50, who's returning to work, or 48, pick your number. And so we're really big on advocacy in that area, making sure that employers understand that DE&I is not just the color of your skin or your gender or orientation, but it's also your age. And many of you, if you've taken an extended career break in particular, you're probably returning to work after 40. We don't want you to feel like there isn't room for you, because there is. Yeah.
And industry leaders' commitment to hiring women returners, like a company like the Mom Project.
And all of the companies that pledge. Yeah. So the worst advice, this is hard because we used to have a slide with like 5 pieces of worst advice, but the worst advice about returning to work after a leave is, no offense, Kelly, but no one's going to hire you after 7 years out of the workforce. Your best bet is either start back at entry level or go back to school for a new degree.
You know what's interesting about this is that could be something that someone says to you, but it also could be something that you're saying to yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, you're saying this to yourself and believing it. And so we want to just talk to you about some of those other mindsets that you're creating.
And it actually is offensive. That's no offense, Kelly, but it is offensive because it's wrong.
Right.
So here's some of the messages that you tell yourself.
Yeah. I've been out for so long. I'm irrelevant. I can't compete with those tech savvy millennials. Once they figure out my age, I'm toast. This is not happening for me.
And it's so easy to figure out your age. So don't think you can hide it because, you could search any one of us right now and get within a couple of years.
Here's a real rational one that we hear all the time. Too much has changed since I left. And who am I kidding trying to go back to work now? And that can feel extremely overwhelming. And talking to yourself that way is going to keep you stuck in circling the drain, and we don't want you to do that.
Our favorite, I haven't done anything during my break that matters. And this is particularly tough for women who've had long breaks. Because if your break was 3 years, and as a hiring manager, I'm looking at your resume and I see 2018, I'm not going to just throw it away because of 2018. But if it says 2008 or 1998, there's just not a good chance I'm going to look at it. So you have done things and you may be thinking that they don't matter, but hopefully this seminar, this masterclass will help change your mind.
Yeah. So we really, like we said, we want you to be open-minded to this. So looking to the career relaunch in the future, do this now.
Here's some things that you do right now. So the first is strategic volunteerism.
So what is that, Susan? Because I feel like that's a term that gets thrown around a lot. Some of you have probably heard that. So let's really kind of break it down for them.
Well, all right. So we're both moms, both of a bunch of kids. It is so easy to get involved with anything in the school, in your faith community, in just your community, in sports, whatever it is. So, and we're not saying that you don't want to volunteer at all, but we need you to become a little more selfish and say no. Say no to the things that don't serve you. So a really good example is if you come from a financial background and you want to continue 2 years, 1 year, 6 months down the road, maybe 5 years down the road in a financial role, well, then try to take on volunteer roles that will help you build those skills. Particularly if you've got a financial role that requires you to have technology skills. Make sure that you volunteer for those things that might allow you a nice safe space to learn a new program. If you're a marketing person, maybe you take on writing or creating a digital newsletter for that team that you're supporting or that school you're supporting. But don't volunteer to stack books in the library. Right? Just be a little more picky about what you do so that it serves your next purpose.
Yeah. Interestingly, Susan, one of the questions that we got was talking specifically about how can I upskill myself, with the technology. And this is a great way to do that.
So you know what? My co-president of the PTO a couple of years ago, she was getting her CPA. She had never taken it and she was studying for it. And so she decided to take on setting up an electronic pay system for us, which was so cool. Like she really learned the ins and outs of that. She moved our finances from just a basic Excel spreadsheet into QuickBooks. So low stakes. If she messed it up, we didn't care because we weren't paying her. But she got those skills in a really safe way.
And you can dive deep. You can go on things like LinkedIn Learning, and you can take a micro course. You can go on YouTube and take a small. We actually have a student right now in our course who is really playing in the tech world, and she is like, you can find everything on YouTube. So knowing that you can take on these roles, because what that's going to do is going to hold you accountable to actually upskilling yourself. Sometimes it's just that accountability.
And it's that you've made the commitment, but at least you're not walking into a company saying, I can do this without having that experience. You're doing it kind of the safe way.
And then you can use it to back it up later in your resume. So
another one is to take on small projects. So a lot of times, I remember this so many times at the beginning of our course where a student would say something like, maybe in week 1, I really haven't done anything. I had a special needs child, and it was
if we could tell you how many times people have said to us, and actually some of you might even be saying this to yourself, I did nothing in my opt-out years. I really haven't done anything.
And then we ask a few questions and she says, well, my husband owns, a company and I do the books. Well, it turns out it's a $200 million company with 70 employees. And she's doing very complex books because they do government contracting. And because she's not paid for it, she just does it for her husband. So that becomes not just I do the books for my company's my husband's company. I'm the CFO of my husband's company. Thank you very much.
Right.
And again, you don't have to do paid work. Sometimes it's barter. Sometimes it could be, you know what, I'll do your books for you, or I'll audit your employee manual. I used to be in HR, you know, if you do this for me, or maybe it's just you're doing it as a volunteer for a friend. Your friend's the HR manager for a company and she needs some help, and you say, I'll help you.
Yeah.
That is still valuable workplace currency. That is not just because it was unpaid in value or unvaluable.
We actually had a couple of questions about this
Yeah.
too that Katie sent us, and it was talking about specifically about what if I've done a bunch of gigs? What if I've done, so two things were being asked. One, how do I handle on a resume if I've done a couple of gigs during, you know, I've freelanced. And two is using the term freelance or gig work or, you know, consulting, aka I wasn't employed. Is that what hiring managers are thinking? Yeah,
well, no. I mean, if it's well presented, a hiring manager is never going to think that. And truth be told, and in certain pockets, in certain industries, you'd be hard pressed to find someone who along the arc of a career of any length didn't do some work freelance at some point. So I would not worry about that at all. But if it's not presented in a compelling way, it could be a problem. So one of the strategies that we teach is—
listen carefully to this, especially if you're
I'm thinking of Lindsay too, who was one of our pilot students. So she had done over a long time, like maybe 18 or 19 years, she'd done all kinds of things. She had done some barter work. She'd done some freelance paid work. She'd done some really robust volunteer work. And when
she actually had a job for like it was like a 3 or 6 month period of time.
She had that one job. It was a cyclical, seasonal job working for a music festival. She was a marketing person, but her resume was all over the place. And so what we decided to do, and now we teach this actually as a bona fide strategy, is to create like a shell company. So it became LMH Project Management.
Those are her initials.
Right. So, and she's not really incorporated, but it doesn't matter. And then it just said, you know, take on select marketing communications assignments and it was mostly in education, entertainment. I forget what the third one was. And then select projects and accomplishments include, and I said, just pick 3 to 5. So, you know, one was created the full digital marketing plan for a seasonal musical festival and gave a couple of examples and some type of measurable accomplishment. That was the paid gig. The other one was created a summer learning program, a summer camp learning program for a private school with a couple of, again, specifics. And that was for free, or that was barter because your kids went to the school.
Yeah, they went to the camp.
The camp, right. And I forget what the third one was, but there were like 3 or 4 examples, very specific. So it implies that for that 18 years, she has been working the whole time. She chose the 4 examples that were most powerful and that best represented not only what she accomplished, but what she wanted to continue doing, which was marketing communication. So what started out as, it just looked like someone who could never keep a job.
Right.
It was a lot of years. She could have either skipped all of that time and put nothing, which would have made her unhireable, or captured it in a way that really reads easily. And again, she didn't share everything she'd ever done. She chose the 4 things that meant the most. I think 2 of them were volunteer, 1 was barter, 1 was paid.
Yeah.
So that's a great strategy.
So using that shell to just be your title and then putting the actual examples essentially underneath it. And, you know, here was a person who was just a really bright mind that wanted to continue to be stimulated during her out years and had a number of different opportunities to do so. So I think
she gets credit, and she gets credit for it. And the next is, and this is one, if you haven't done this, you can always go back and do it. If you think, well, I would say if you're really early in your leave and you think you want to go back at some point, I imagine you do if you're here, keep your licensure up. Even if you don't think you're going to go back to that career, it's nice to have a fallback. So keep up with your CEs. If you haven't, you can go back retroactively and do those. Another easy one is keep up your subscriptions to trade journals or e-journals that are within your industry. Just keep yourself current with continuing ed or publications so that you kind of know what's happening in your industry.
And here's the thing, if you haven't done that and you have some lead time, this is still your opt-out, you're not returning to work tomorrow. You don't have a financial imperative that's forcing you to do that per se. Do the due diligence to find out what is the process, how do I do it, what are the steps that I'm going to take, and then hold yourself accountable to getting those things done, whether that means, you know, saying to your spouse or to a friend who is going to say,
Right.
did you get this licensure back yet? Are you getting that underway? Because sometimes it can just be, I'm not even going back until another 3 years from now. I know that when my first child goes off to kindergarten, I actually need to start thinking about how to build back that licensure, and that takes time and prep and an understanding of what that path is. So use this time wisely to do that if you have that opportunity.
We had a question about, this is kind of along those lines, about learning, about should I go back to school and get a degree? And we don't say no to that.
We don't.
But we do say wait. So if you're going to make a commitment to go back to school to get another degree or to get a graduate degree,
just financially make that
right, it's a huge decision. You should not do it without having done a whole lot of research. That this is the path that you want, and that this degree is necessary. Master's degrees matter in a lot of industries. They don't matter in most. Your experience matters more. You may, if you're really interested for your own professional development to go to that next academic level, you may be able to land the job without it and then have them pay for you to get that. So just make sure you've done the research.
And I think another piece of what can happen here is we can hide behind that.
Definitely.
We can hide behind it thinking, well, you know what, I can't do this until this happens. And it might just be a bit of fear of getting yourself out there, or even just asking people who are doing that kind of work, would you hire someone like me without this particular degree? We had a student just this past week, this just came up, and she was specifically talking about, she was going to get a JD. I'm going back to get a JD. So it's like, that is a huge commitment. And she felt that she couldn't take this position on. And when we questioned her and asked her, did you even ask if that is something that you really need? She said, no. I have all the skills to be able to carry out what they're asking me to carry out. I just didn't even think to ask the question. And so,
But back to your hiding point, sometimes it's just a way for you to buy time. Like, you want to go back to work, but you don't really want to put yourself out there. So if you go to graduate school, it looks good. It makes you feel good, but maybe you're hiding a little bit.
Well, and some people think that they're going to build back their network. And that way, we've done a lot of work with universities now. And really the networking kind of comes in your own backyard. So you don't necessarily need to go back to school to build back a network as well. Right.
So a few more things. One is to stay informed. And this one is a big one, especially if this goes whether you're going to be launching in the future or now. Just choose your news gathering sources wisely. If you're getting all of your information from mommy blogs and like Light News and the Today Show and Facebook, up your game.
We've all had done our version of this. Like some days it's good to go to the shallow place.
It is. It feels good. But up your game a little bit. Make sure that you're keeping up with industry news, whether this is an industry that's established for you or one that you're interested in pursuing. And then again, you maintain or renew or take on new trade journal subscriptions. Just make sure that you know the language and know what's happening in the industry that you might enter. And nurture your network. We did have a question about that as well. You should stay connected. If you have just recently left the workforce, please continue to keep those relationships going. It's so easy with social media. When Kelly and I both left after our first children, there wasn't Facebook. You couldn't, there wasn't LinkedIn.
Well, that's what I was saying to you. I said, when I first opted out and we moved, I lost my entire professional network because it was in an entirely different part of the country. So that is overwhelming to have to.
But if we had LinkedIn and Facebook, you wouldn't have lost it.
Right. And we didn't have those things back then.
So the other
that shows how old I am.
I got you by a decade or more. But the other thing to remember is that one of the questions was, it feels awkward to reach back to old. Let me just tell you something. I just recently reconnected with a guy that I worked with in big tech 26 years ago. And just within the last few months, I saw him on LinkedIn. I was like, oh my God, I hired this guy. His father was my client, and the guy's like CEO of a tech company now. So you connect with him. And it was instant. I mean, he remembered everything. We were chatting. Now we keep in touch with each other. We watch our careers. It feels like forever to you. It does not feel like forever to the person that you're reconnecting with. They will be so happy to hear from you. And I know the questioner said, well, we have nothing in common. Of course you have something in common. Just because someone else is working doesn't mean that they don't still have hobbies that you share. They may even have children like you do, but they're doing it a different way because they're working. Please do not be shy about reaching out to people. They're going to be happy to hear from you. And it's a really essential piece of getting back. And then lastly, And this is
Can I
really,
just say one more thing about that?
Yeah, of course.
And sometimes it's doing it just in a low stakes way. It's not going back to them with the I need a job question. It's actually not even
No,
starting there.
no, no. Yep.
It's really just talking about, hey, how are you?
Yeah.
Like where has your life taken you?
Yeah.
Here's where my life has taken me. Just having some sort of low stakes conversation, and you can build on that
Mhm.
relationship. But oftentimes we think, oh God, I can't even talk to those people anymore
Right.
because when I left, I was at this level and now I haven't done anything. Don't do that to yourself.
Mhm.
When you were at that level, that was fine and great and fantastic for all of the achievements it took to get you there. You didn't lose all of that.
Mhm.
You still
actually-
have access to it. Yeah.
Actually, you've done a lot, and that's the last bullet.
Yeah.
We want you to think differently and reframe the things that you've done.
Yeah.
So that home building or remodeling or flipping homes, like we hear a lot of our students do,
Yeah.
is project management, or investing your family finances is financial planning, or quarterbacking the care of a sick relative is healthcare advocacy.
Yeah.
So we're going to kind of take you through this whole piece now.
Yeah.
And you will get a PDF that will help you with this.
Yeah.
So the first, we just want you to know right off the bat, and
some of you, if you've been with us before, have gotten that PDF.
Yeah, yes, that's right, you have.
But it's so great.
It's good.
And we actually updated it.
We updated it a little bit, and it's always good to look back at from a different perspective, even 6 months later. The things that you have done as a caregiver, as a community volunteer, as a professional resource to your tribe, they count. So here's some examples. Bookkeeping. You manage the family investment portfolio, or you're the treasurer of the PTO, or you do the books for the family business. Those things all matter, and they belong on a resume, and they belong to be boldly talked about in an interview or networking call. Marketing. And these are just common examples. We're giving you 4. There are many more. And the downloadable PDF that we'll be giving you will ask you lots of questions to take you through what your superpowers are. Mm-hmm. This one is marketing. You edit your church newsletter. You post the social media content for a sports league. You design the concert program for the school. Those things count. Project management. You've been the GC for a major home rebuild, or you manage, we've had a lot of people, oh, well, we have an apartment building that we manage and I do it.
Or we flipped multiple houses.
Right.
We moved multiple times and flipped multiple houses.
And why would you not put that on your resume?
Right.
That counts too. And then lastly, human resources. Maybe you're on the hiring committee for your school system, or you are helping people write a policy manual, or you've edited a manual, like I gave the example earlier. That stuff all counts. Okay. So fact number 2, what you've done will count more to an employer or a networker if you present it well.
And that's the key. That is the key, is to present it well. And we're going to give you 2 tools today that are going to help you do that. So that first is that resume gap buster guide. If you have been on any, we've actually given it every single time. And this time we took a second look at it and just really went in and added some things to update it, and especially in COVID times, because there's been some changes with that. So what is that going to give you?
So that one's going to give you the tools to do what we just talked about. It's going to be talking about, okay, what am I, it's going to ask you all the same 5 questions, like, well, how am I getting my news? What am I doing to volunteer strategically? And then you have an opportunity to kind of write it out. We're big believers in writing out, not just sitting in a computer, really sitting and reflecting with a notebook and say, okay, what have I done? And looking at these things, the questions will help you look at it more critically, both for a return in the future and one more imminently. And then the second thing we're going to give you
is something new we've added.
It was something we taught in our course, but we never really put anything together. And this actually is a page right from our course workbook, but it's a storytelling guide. And you are always more memorable. And I can tell you, because I have done thousands and thousands of interviews over my career. If you tell me that you're really good under chaos, that's great. But if you tell me a really good story, I'm going to remember you. She's the girl who did triage on 9/11. I'll never forget her. That was a long time ago. She told me that story. But I still remember her. So it's teaching you how to remember your stories, and then how to frame them. Because if you just have maybe 2 really awesome stories about you being the star of the day, they can be used to answer different questions. And so this template will help take you through that thought process. It's really helpful.
There's a bit of a struggle, and this came up in the questions. How much, like, when do I tell people about particular gap that's on my resume. If it were that I was homesick for an
Yeah.
extended period of time,
Yeah.
how do I explain that? So
Yeah.
how would you say it? Because this is where this storytelling, or is this something that I address on my resume?
Yeah.
This always comes up. We get a question.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, we have one in our course right now.
Yeah.
So, okay. So this person was asking about a personal health leave, right?
Yeah, I actually think the question was, what about years when you were ill for an extended period of time? I was ill for 5 years and don't know how to address the gap in my resume.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right, two things to consider on this. Number one, if the most recent 5 years were when she was ill, it would be handled very differently.
Okay.
If you've had any period of time that you've been out built into the resume, but not the most recent, then it doesn't really need addressing at all. Because as a hiring manager, I'm most interested in what you most recently did first.
Yeah.
So if you've already been working for 5 years, I don't care that you took 10 years off before to care for an ill family member or for yourself. I'm not going to ask.
Or even just some of the strategies that you just gave.
Right.
So if you were home ill for 5 years.
But you were still doing all this other stuff,
Yes,
which is
yeah.
probably not likely.
Mhm.
But if you have an empty space in the last 5 years because you've been ill, it's a little tricky.
Mhm.
You do not want to address it in a cover letter or in a resume. It's really something that requires a conversation. You could address it in a cover letter, I should say, the same way you'd address it with a frontline recruiter, which would just be something like, you'll see in like the last 5 years, I was on a caregiving break, but I'd like to call your attention to the things that I did for the 15 years prior.
So give it this much airtime and go straight to, so a strategy that we actually teach is called acknowledge and pivot. You have acknowledged the elephant in the room with one, say the line again. What was the line?
You'll notice that I took a 5-year caregiving break from 2015 to present. I'd like to call your attention to the things I did prior.
Pivot.
Okay.
Acknowledge.
And that's if you have none of this, if you don't have any of this stuff, if those 5 years were dedicated strictly to healthcare, you could say the same thing if you were caring for an ill family member.
Yep.
And then you could probably be more specific and say, I took the last 5 years to care for an ill family member. Another thing you could say, whether it was for someone else or for yourself, during that time, although I wasn't able to work or volunteer because I was dedicated to that caregiving, I really did learn the ins and outs of the healthcare system, became a really successful healthcare advocate.
So do you see how when she pivoted like that, she pivoted to an empowered place of, you acknowledge the caregiver, and then you go into the place of, I learned a lot about the healthcare system, and you moved herself through it, but really shows that I have a strength now because of it, and you're going to keep
and focusing on strength. Women tend to overshare.
Yes.
And in a situation like this, unfortunately, you don't want to let a hiring manager know that you just came off a sick break, right? I mean, that just opens up too many things, and you don't know the person.
And it can be highly emotionally charged
too.
And you don't want to have this very, very high emotion moment with someone that you don't know really well, who hasn't earned the right to really hear your story.
On the other hand, if you make it all the way through the interview process and you're sitting with the hiring manager and you're negotiating, or they've already, you're there, and they ask you, what's your biggest success? It could be, that 5-year break, I was caring for myself. I was really sick, and now I'm fully healed. My scans are all great. And I'm just so excited to have this conversation get started.
Yeah, I'm recharged. I'm ready for this. And so that becomes the story that you're telling, and you're telling it in an interview with somebody who actually has the power to hire you.
It's from a position of strength.
Yes, and it's from a position
of strength. And at the point that you're telling it, they already love you.
Yes.
At the beginning, they don't love you yet. You don't bring any baggage into the conversation, that unless you want to, ever. And if you feel like this is something that really is important to tell, because it's showing me my strengths, then you tell it at the end when they're already in love with you.
And Susan, this also can go for, if you have a child with special needs, you've had to take care of. We have a lot of women that we work
with. We
We
probably have 25% of every cohort.
Every cohort of students, yes. And so there is a time and a place for it. You don't have to tell the full story up front. You can just say, especially on the recruiter level, I had a caregiver break, and then you pivot to something that's more powerful. And then once you get down to the hiring manager, we promise you, telling that story in some way, shape, or form in that interview can be a mic drop moment for you. And it's worth being a mic drop moment, because it shows your strength.
You got the right ears
there.
It
shows your strength, yeah.
All right, so you're going to have those 2 tools. We'll be providing those. The Mom Project will send you an email after this fact.
Yeah.
We want to end with some success stories because
Yes.
this is just so much more powerful. So we'll
Yeah.
just take you through these 4. Tina was from our spring 2019 cohort. Tina actually owned a business. She was a stylist. She was a hair and makeup stylist to the stars, and in LA. She moved to Seattle. Her husband started a tech company. She stayed home for 22 years to raise her 2 daughters. And she entered the course thinking that she might be starting a new business.
Mm-hmm.
And when
she was doing a lot during that time.
Really cool interview stuff, a lot with the Visitors Bureau in San Francisco or in LA when she lived there. And then she actually started doing some docent work at a museum in Seattle.
She did a lot of legal kind of work.
She did a couple of assignments as a legal assistant when she was kind of dabbling. She did some work for her husband's software company.
Yeah.
But when she sat down and really looked at what excited her, she loved working in law.
Mm-hmm.
And so Tina is actually one of our students who went back to school. She's almost completed her 2-year paralegal certificate.
Yeah.
And in a small world moment, I have a friend who's got a New York City boutique practice who was looking for a paralegal, and I connected her with Tina Martinez, and now they're going to be working together.
Yeah.
And Tina had a 22-year break. Amy had an 8-year break.
Yeah.
She's a CPA, worked in big public accounting, and during her break, she was one of the ones that waited until like week 8 to tell us, oh yeah, by the way, my husband and I bought some buildings, and I GC'd the renovation, and I run all the rentals.
So we're about to start resume, and all of a sudden it comes out. It was
like an afterthought.
She has this huge body of work to fill her gap.
Mm-hmm.
And she was so worried because she had worked at, a very high.
She went to EY or PwC.
Yeah. So she really had this
Mm-hmm.
like fear that, oh gosh, it's not going to matter. We were like, hold up, sister. I mean, there is a lot that you can fill that gap with, and we're going to do that. So.
She knew that she didn't want to go back into Big 6 or Big 4, whatever it is, public accounting. And she could have, because she had left on good terms. And so she actually kind of took this experience as an entrepreneur, and she's working as a CPA for hire, but she's working not just at the audit level, which is where she left, but in the real feet on the street kind of hands in the nitty gritty style that she's been doing as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So she's thrilled, and she names her price, and she's got her first assignment already.
Flexible work, like all of the things.
Yeah, because her kids are still young.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kelly had an 18-year gap.
Yeah.
She's in Chicago. Amy's in Pittsburgh, I said that. And Kelly, on her first resume, it said Lollipop Tree School. And she'd worked for preschool for I think 15 years as a preschool teacher. And that was great, but the school was part of the Archdiocese of Chicago, which is really who her employer was. So instantly it has more cachet when it says Archdiocese of Chicago. And it turns out she did many other things, not just as a preschool teacher, but for the Catholic school system in Chicago. So she was able to embed some of that. Her early experience was at NCAA large school. She was at Northwestern in a communications role. And she's already got an intern. She just graduated from our winter cohort, which just ended.
Yeah.
And then Julyn, which is kind of one of our favorite stories. Julyn, I think, was winter of 2019. Mm-hmm. Julyn was a home.
Julyn in and of herself has 9 million awesome success stories.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah,
she does. Yeah. But what makes her story so compelling is that she stayed home for 18 years to homeschool 2 autistic boys. Mm-hmm. And she was so cute. She was like, how the heck am I going to write that? She said, you know what they're going to think? They're going to picture like mom in overalls, with braids, who doesn't want to go into public schools and whatever. She had this whole image of what people were going to think. But it turns out that she did a lot of advocacy work, a lot of curriculum development work for a network of other homeschoolers, many of whom were homeschooling children whose needs just couldn't be met in the public school system. She actually went to the state capitol and did some high-level advocacy work. So what she thought of was going to be a real negative.
Yeah.
And she landed a job immediately. She turned 2 offers down before landing a job at a major aerospace company as the executive assistant for one of their top 3 C-suite employees.
But what each one of these women have in common is that they were telling a compelling story, and they believed it. Mm-hmm. They saw the value of the work they had done in those opt-out years, and they're able to package it in a way that is impactful. And that is what they have in common. And you have that. All of you have that. We know this.
It's also what you said earlier. It's that they had to believe it first themselves before they could.
Yeah.
It took them a little time.
Yeah.
So those are our success stories. Yeah. The 2 things we want you to leave with today are, number 1, make the most of your opt-out years, either now or looking retrospectively, and boldly pitch what you've done on your career break. We know this, we've been doing this for a long time. It does matter. It matters to an employer what you've done.
And it's also going to grow your confidence, you know, just actually taking that step to really look at this and say, I have done a lot. And you are far wiser than when you left the workforce. That we know for sure. Thousands of women return to work every day using this strategy. And if you use it and you execute it well, you can relaunch your career too. So,
we're on time.
We did. We even promised that 20 minutes we would be.
All right.
We'll give you 20 minutes.
So here's how you can connect with us. We're online. We're going to send you a link. Our Mom Project will send you 2 documents, that resume gap buster guide, the storytelling template, and a link to an information session. We do offer our career relaunch course 3 times a year. And the spring session starts on April 12th. We'll be doing an information session. It's just pretty much a brief presentation and a live Q&A. If you want to learn about our program, our 10-week program, it is available to a small cohort of women, application only. And you'll learn all about that on the 29th. If not, you'll get to watch the recording. And all that will come through the Mom Project. And now I'm going to stop talking and let you guys talk. So please, if you want to read us some questions.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, thank you as always for being so thoughtful. And I loved those stories at the end. I mean, 4 very different experiences. They all did it. I think the power, right, of like just really getting your story down and owning your narrative. And, you know, as women, I feel like a lot of times we're like kind of shy about like owning all our accomplishments. So just really, really inspiring to see their successes and how they really, particularly the woman in South Carolina. That's incredible. Anyway, all right. So I'm going to just pop in here. So for everybody in the chat, keep the questions coming. I'm going to go take a peek at the questions that were submitted ahead of time while we wait for someone to come in. But one question that's interesting is, how can I string together gap jobs as I pursue getting back to my former career? So maybe like it wasn't their dream job or really a job that like aligns with their career path, but it was what they had to do while they were kind of caregiving and still making some income. Any thoughts there?
Well, it's kind of using the Lindsay strategy that we talked about. And I think where women get tripped up is, well, I don't want to say like, you know, SRD consulting or marketing communications or whatever, because this was an actual job where I worked for them and this was a project. Nobody cares. Okay. It doesn't matter if you're an employee or not. So the best way to link them together is to pick the ones that have the best cachet at maybe 3. I like things in 3. 3 bullets. These are 3 things I did. So if one of them was working as a paraprofessional in the public schools for a year, you could just put Chicago Public Schools, you know, enrichment coach, or, you know, academic, you know, enrichment. I don't know. I mean, I don't know which, I'm not a teacher. But.
Well, you would, I think it's because what people will put is room mom.
Yeah, you're not putting that.
We're not putting
no, I'm talking about, no, like if they had a job though. Because I'm thinking like a lot of people will take those paraprofessional jobs. You could just say, you know,
they would be,
you know, academic tutor, because often the paras are assigned to a student, you know, academic coach to a disabled child or to a
child special needs.
Child, thank you. Kelly's teacher.
I worked in education.
So you can link those together. You have permission to do that. So you're worried like, well, I can't really say that because I wasn't really working as SRD, you know, marketing and communication. It's fine. No one's going to call the school and say, was she a paraprofessional on your staff or was she working as a consultant? Nobody's going to do that. So that's one way of linking them together. Then that would be really, that's the only way to do it if you're going to use that strategy. Otherwise, you have disparate jobs, and that's fine too, because this question I'm seeing right on my screen from Jennifer Fry. I've done all this stuff, but I think my resume writing gets lost in a black hole. Only, just remember this too. You have about a 10% chance, any one of you on this call or watching it later, of getting a job by applying online through an ATS, an applicant tracking system, whether it be through a job board or direct to the company. 10%. Your odds are a little better through the Mom Project, but they're still not that great. There are far more women looking for family-friendly jobs than there are family-friendly jobs, right, Katie?
Oh, yes.
So you have to try to beat the odds, and the only way to do it is not to do it that way. You have to network. You have to learn how to strategically network so that somebody goes into Kelly's office and says, Kelly, I mean, this is how the conversation goes. I've been the Kellys. Hey, I liked this girl. I worked with her 10 years ago. She'd interview her. That enough, just that is enough to catapult you to the top of my pile. You know why? Because I know nothing about this 1,200 people that are applying online. And I already know that Kelly thought this person was decent.
Yeah.
You know, they're not an axe murderer. They're not in jail. Great. They're on the top of the pile because for all I know, these other people are.
Well, and that's the example if you did work with a person, but if you're even pivoting and changing careers, and it could be someone in your own community that you worked on a committee with.
Exactly. If that likes you.
That likes you. We have a student, Angela. Angela is a perfect example of this. She came to us, and she was actually a client, not a student.
Yeah.
But she came to us, and she realized that she had an opportunity with a woman who she worked on a committee with, and her husband was hiring for.
And this is a sideline conversation.
Yes, it was a sideline conversation, and she said, "Oh my gosh, what do you mean you're going back to work? I'm going to talk to Frank because he completely would hire you. You're amazing." And so all it was his wife saying, "You are amazing. This woman's amazing, and you better hire her. You would be lucky to get her." I've heard more stories that have happened that way. And if you are prepared, you have your resume prepared, you have yourself polished.
You know how to tell your story. You know how to interview. You know how to negotiate the best offer for yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is going to be your way in, is in that networking. And so start to think differently about everything. Start to think differently about where you're spending your time when you're volunteering. Start to think differently about the people that you're volunteering with. Who are they?
And think about them differently, right?
Yes.
Think about them, not in terms of just as the volunteer that helps me with the bake sale, but gee, I wonder what she did in her last job. I wonder what her spouse does.
Yeah.
I wonder what connections she has. But I think, Jennifer, you're right. It probably is in the black hole because 90% of them end up in the black hole.
Right. Yeah. Kind of building from that, a question that just came in. So someone asked, what is the best way to verbally describe volunteer work, PTA, et cetera, in an interview? I see the ways to wordsmith this on a resume, but when you actually start describing it in a conversation, does it start to lose its luster and become selling raffle tickets again?
Yeah, well, that's all part of the storytelling, right? Really getting clear on that. So typically, if you're in an interview, if I'm interviewing you, I'm not going to spend a lot of time asking you about what you did for this public school system. I mean, if it's interesting, I might say, tell me how you drove, year over year, you achieved your year over year development goal. How'd you do that? Well, it was building relationships with local businesses. It was, making sure that people were hearing about us top of mind. So writing press releases, getting stuff out there so they knew what the public school system was doing. Because you know what? Fact of the matter is, unless you have children in the schools, you don't know. So you can see I'm using language like community relations, writing a press release, development instead of fundraising. You don't have to talk about, you are in control of how much you disclose. The thing that Kelly mentioned, it's one of my favorite things to teach, acknowledge and pivot. Sometimes it's, yes, acknowledging a little bit what you did there. But you know what? I think a better example of my community relations experiences, it was, 10 years ago, but it was, same vein, this is what I did. So again, stop oversharing. You don't have to get into the granular raffle tickets piece. It's development. It's community relations. It's building partnerships with local businesses. It's that language.
Well, and I also think that a great way that you say is, I want you to do this for them because I think it's really powerful, is that when you're asked some of these questions on an interview, like, what would you say is the biggest obstacle that or how would you handle, like an obstacle that you overcame, and you sort of reference to your previous work that you did, like, I could have done that, but it's actually in the work that I do.
Yeah. I mean, this is one. So let's say, like, you've done big stuff in the corporate world. Maybe it was 20 years ago. So to give a good example, you kind of have to be current. So the question might be, Susan, give me an example of, when you've really had to bring different stakeholders together to reach a goal.
Good.
And I'd say, well, obviously when I worked at IBM, I did that all the time because I was working with like big client and then little local dealer trying to get everybody on board to make sure the installation went well. So give it some airtime. But you know what, Katie, I actually think, it's going to sound kind of silly maybe, but I think the best example was recently when I was in charge of a land acquisition for the Avon Land Trust. And I had to deal with, this is total
volunteer experience.
I had to deal with adjoining property owners. I had to deal with the press that was looking to kind of dig up some dirt because not a lot happens here in rural Connecticut. I had to, whatever it is. Yeah. So it's reminding them, I started out in big tech, I know my stuff.
Yeah.
But then giving some value that's more current.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think it's also, I want you to see the structure of what she did. She gave you a lead. She gave something to grab that interviewer's attention of, yeah, like I probably could go back and tell you a story from when I used to work at IBM 20 years ago, but instead I'm going to now tell you how I executed it in just a volunteer experience.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just giving.
But I didn't say just, and I didn't even say volunteer. I just said,
I said just a bunch of times.
That's one of the words I try to get you guys to forget. But
I actually would say, I wouldn't say silly. This might sound silly. I wouldn't say that. I would just say,
yeah, you're right. I shouldn't have said that. So we keep each other honest. But I think whoever asked that question, it takes practice.
Mm-hmm.
You have this storytelling template will be very helpful for you,
mm-hmm.
because all you have to do is memorize like 3, maybe 4 stories. And you can answer so many different questions. You're not interviewing with the same person over and over again. You practice, you write it out, you practice it. You find, another thing you need to find is some type of measurable accomplishment. Don't tell me that you raised, $1,140, which might be so huge in Girl Scout cookie sales, but that's just not going to work. But tell me that you grew sales in, 40% year over year. That might just mean that you grew at $300, but it sounds a lot better than $300. So you're always looking for the best way to present. And it really requires empathy. You have to think about the person on the other side of the desk. Don't make them have to make these connections for you. I don't have time. Mm-hmm. I'm getting 1,200 resumes for this job posting. You're lucky that if I even look at it, and if it doesn't make sense to me, I'm not going to look at it. Mm-hmm. And it's not because I'm mean. It's because I'm busy. It's because everybody's applying for everything at the same time. Okay.
Yeah, makes total sense. This is an interesting question that came in through the chat. So I know kind of in the top of your presentation, you kind of identified as a gap as 3+ years. Somebody, it sounds like they're considering opting out for a few years, but are thinking about taking maybe less than 3 years. Is there anything different they should be thinking about in terms of what they're doing in that time frame than someone who might?
Yeah, I mean, you just don't even know. This is what I'm going to tell you. I've been in this business probably longer than some of you have been alive. So you just don't know how you're going to feel.
Don't make yourself
No, but I mean, I remember when I left the corporate world, when I was pregnant, when I started on my maternity leave, I was going to take 4 months off. I had just gotten offered my dream job, which was going to require international travel. It was huge. I was so excited. And then he was born and I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And then I thought, well, I'll just take a couple years off. Well, then I had 3 more children in 4 more years.
Right.
And I never went back full time. I never even went back. I started my own things.
Right.
You don't know how you're going to feel. So any one of you who thinks you're going to plan it out, you're wrong. Your children they have their own timelines. They have their own minds, and you don't know how you're going to feel. So the best advice is the minute you take your gap, just do a couple little things. If it's just
all the things that you're saying at the very beginning,
1 or 2 of them, keep in touch with a few colleagues, keep reading about your industry.
Yeah. Keep your licensure up. That's something that you can do.
It's all about options.
Yes. It's even just thinking about where are you spending your time when you're volunteering. And this is where, and actually this was something that came up. It's like, sometimes you say yes to things that you shouldn't be saying yes to. And even if you've done that, but you still have a little bit of an entrance ramp now before you return to work, just start doing it today.
When we started this, you were like, all right, I am not signing up for this crap anymore. I mean, I don't have time for this. Like, if I'm going to sign up for something, it's going to be something that really excites me and makes me a better business person.
Yes, or grows me. Grows me, gives me an education. So if you're thinking about things to invest your time in, think about the tech things that that are going to keep you current and push you forward.
You could set up a Slack, like somebody said, how do I learn Slack? We just learned Slack. Our students taught us.
Yeah.
We had our own social media connection site built into our website that students took. They didn't like it.
Yeah, they told us that.
They did. They stopped using it. They set up their own Slack page, and then we hired one of our students to teach us to set up Slack pages for us. Teach us. It's so easy.
But but
you could do it for your friends, like for your book club. We're gonna do Slack now.
Yeah, that's how we're going to talk with each other. That could definitely be something you're doing. If you don't know what Slack is right now, when you get off of this, Google it, see what it is, get a better understanding of it. But that's one thing we learned through just doing this course with our students is that building some of the experiential learning of using G Suite, using, something like Slack is important.
And then using it in a low stakes way as a volunteer where no one's going to fire you because they're not getting paid anyway.
Just even Zoom in and of itself, people have become so much more proficient with this because of necessity. So oftentimes, because we have lived a life that is so busy and we are taking care of so many different people, we don't put the structures in place that will hold us accountable for growing a new skill or doing something that is, to the benefit of our later on down the line career. Just build it in, just little things. You don't have to do it full force. You don't have to do it 100% because you were a high achieving person that left a big tech company, and you don't have to do it like to the nth degree. You can just do little snippets of it over time and enjoy your children, enjoy the time with him, enjoy the connection that you're getting when you're home with your child. So,
yeah. That's great. I know I always say, just stay curious. What gets you excited? Like,
exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Actually, a question that was submitted with the RSVPs that kind of builds off of what you said. So, like maybe newer technology like Slack or Adobe, HubSpot, there's a whole realm of things. I mean, if somebody takes the time to kind of skill up a bit in that area as they're looking to reenter, should they build a specific skills section like in the resume, or is that more of like something that can come up more organically in the conversation to like highlight that they are?
No, I mean, I definitely like a skills section in a resume, just to highlight, but I don't want to see people person, team player. That's not a skill. Skills are very distinct from qualities. Skills are learned. I don't know. Skills. Yeah. They're learned. They're learned. They're not kind of just germane to your person. So I think that you'd have to invest to learn some of the things like HubSpot. I think you said HubSpot.
HubSpot actually has pretty robust free resources for anybody who's curious out there.
Salesforce does too. So HubSpot and Salesforce are CRM systems. They help companies manage the relationship with the client. So if you're old enough, you might have done like had a Rolodex where you had little cards that said, I spoke to this person on January 1st. I'm going to call them on March 30th to do this. And that's what CRM is. It's been automated. There are a number of tools. So here's an example. This is a student actually that came to us from our very first engagement with you. Her name was Debbie. She was from New Jersey. She had worked on Wall Street and she took 16 years off to be with her girls, and she did PTO and like girls lacrosse. And and she'd done some interesting things. She kind of did as much as she could to make those things sound good. She knew she wanted to get back into client support. That's what she had been in. And she knew that she wanted to kind of maybe work at a financial company. And what she did was, knowing that, she did her research. She talked to people. She talked to some of her old colleagues. She networked, like Kelly mentioned, at the bus stop and on the sidelines. And she determined that for her to do that kind of work, it would be very helpful if she knew the administrative side of a tool like Salesforce or HubSpot. So on her own dime, she went and got the Salesforce administrator. It took her 6 months, low cost, but big commitment time-wise. And she got a job within 2 weeks. Okay. But she knew. We've had just as many students that have, what's that one that, we have one student that's done a few, I'm drawing a blank on it, but it's one of those kind of aggregate sites where they have lots of different tech training. It'll come to me in a minute. They're very popular. General Assembly. It's like $3,500, and she did 2 courses for them, but she hadn't done the work to determine that those were the skills that she needed for the work that she wanted to do. So just to make sure, many companies will hire you if you just know the basics, unless you're trying to get into a tech role. If you know how to make your way around cloud computing on Google Docs, if you know how to use a streaming platform like Zoom, if you know the basics of Microsoft, can work your way around a spreadsheet, know how to create a document, know how to make a PowerPoint slide. A lot of these things, if your kids are like over 8, they can teach them to you because they're using them at school.
That's really interesting.
And I think I just have to say this, though, a big piece of it is not just doing it,
willy-nilly
or there or whatever. Get structured about it. Give yourself the accountability. You are busy human beings, and you will find ways to put this on the back burner because you are doing for everyone else. So that's why if you can embed it in a volunteer then you're held accountable to other people, and then it can go on your resume because it's work that you've done,
Right.
you know? So,
But the licensure and the skill can go regardless
yes,
of whether
yeah,
you can show
yeah,
where
yeah,
it
yeah.
was. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's important. I know people are always like, what should I take this course? And it's like, does it make sense? Like if
Have you
you
talked to
time,
people?
energy, commitment, yeah. But yeah, okay. Well, we are up on time here. Before we, turn this off for the day, I just would love, do you guys have any last little parting words of wisdom you want to share with the group?
Well, mine, of course, is going to
Yeah,
be,
go ahead.
mine's going to just be about just permission to own these years and the value that are in them. I think one of the things that we can do, and it's, is it by design? Is it because of what society says to us? I'm not sure what it is that does this, but we shrink ourselves down and think that it doesn't have value. Look at your life. Look at these years. There is so much value that has happened in these years, and it might not be something that necessarily lands on a resume, but it is something that's going to make you stronger, and it is something that our workforce needs. And so it's just giving yourself permission to just have a different perspective when you're coming at this. You have a lot of value, and sometimes it's just reminding yourself of that.
Amen to
And
that.
building on that, I'd say be bold.
Yeah.
Be bold. Walk out there, chin held high. You've done good work. You've also served humanity, right? Somebody's got to be taking care of our kids and our elderly parents and our sick relatives.
Yeah.
So just own it.
Yeah.
Be bold about it. Do not apologize. You only apologize if you knock someone's tea over or you're late to the meeting, and you say one thank you.
Yeah.
That's it. Oh, actually two, one at the beginning, one at the end, but that's it. Skip all the I'm sorry's and thank yous.
And I'm
just
so
be,
grateful.
and be bold.
I will take whatever comes my way.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. None of that.
So we hope some of you will join us for our information session.
Yeah.
Our course is really fantastic. You're getting lots of little free pieces of it here, but we pull it all together within a community of really awesome women.
Well, I was just going to say, I think of course the courses are fantastic, but I'll tell you what is more amazing is the women and what they mean to each other. We have watched cohort after cohort go through this now, the support system that they become for each other.
We see it happen on the screen, they become friends.
Phenomenal. It's phenomenal because it can be really lonely walking this journey by yourself. So when you've got a team, a tribe of women doing it with you, it expedites the process. So.
All right, Katie, thank you so much for inviting us again. We love your people. We love you guys.
Jen, thanks for being in the chat.
Yes, Jen, thanks.
And guys, stay tuned for the follow-up email. We'll include a recording and then all the ways you can get in touch with Susan and Kelley and sign up for their session next week. So thank you all again for joining us, and have a